Sometimes it's just better to leave well enough the hell alone. Hey everyone, it's Movie Lover 120 here, and I'm here with another Top 11 video, and this Top 11 is going to be for a follow-up to a video I did back earlier in the year around the summertime. And now, of course, remember when I did those Top 11 movies that should have never had a sequel? Well, I thought of quite a few other movies that also should have just been one movie. Yeah. So I decided to make another Top 11 movies that should have never ever had a sequel, because there are just so many movies I can think of, but we're just going to keep it down to 11, guys. But yeah, anyway, with that being said, here we go. Alright, so kicking off at number 11 is going to be a controversial choice, because I do like about 3 of these sequels this movie got, but I also do kind of wish it did still stay as one movie because of its iconic ending, and that is for none other than 2004's Saw. Yes, I know that's a controversial pick, but hear me out, guys, and here's why I think this movie should have stayed one movie alone. Because this film also pretty much sparked a controversially not liked genre in the horror industry, and that is the torture porn genre. Basically, so you have this movie. This movie's about 2 guys awaken in a bathroom, find a dead body between them, realize they're part of a serial killer's deadly game, and they must try to do something horrific to one another if they're going to get out alive, while piecing together how they got there in the first place. Like, the film is brilliantly told through flashbacks. I just outright love Saw. Like I said, it's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. It's got a genius concept, a very clever original premise at the time, and of course it kind of feels like Seven in kind of some ways. However, what eventually followed were too many sequels, and thanks to these sequels, Saw just became known as just some torture porn film starter, something James Wan and Leigh Whannell were never supposed to intend it to be. Yeah, but however, let's take a look at the sequels. Saw 2, also a very good sequel, not as good as the first one per se, but you knew do a little more about Jigsaw in a way, but which was a little nice. Saw 3, alright sequel, but it really started to go into the torture porn genre, but 4, 5, 6, 7 Jigsaw are just terrible sequels, nonetheless. And then you got Spiral, the Book of Saw, the newest one. And I gotta say, I actually kind of like that one. That's probably my 3rd favorite in the series. I'm gonna get so much anger for saying that, but I actually liked how Spiral did something different and just rehashed the same bullshit again and again and again and again and again, like some of the other Saw sequels kept doing. But yeah. But like basically, as Saw had just been stayed one movie, that iconic twist at the very end of the first one could have been known as one of the most iconic endings in his cinema. It could have been probably one of the most iconic films in horror had Saw just been one movie, but nope, since Saw made over 100 million worldwide, Lionsgate decided, hey, let's make more of these fuckers. And let's just make it even gorier and even nastier each movie. Let's just not focus on the plot. We'll release them each and every year. We'll just rush them in. So yeah, that's why I still wish, despite liking 2, 3, and Spiral, Saw should have just stayed one movie, and one movie alone. Alright, now that we covered number 11, let's cover number 10. I personally think so. Number 10 is actually going to be for an animated movie from 2014, and is not a Disney or Pixar or DreamWorks animated film. This is for an animated film from Warner Brothers, a film that launched them back into the animation industry, and as of course for 2014's The Lego Movie. Now, whenever it comes to non-Disney animated films of recent times, I always pick The Lego Movie as number 1. I think I would tie this between Lego Movie and Into the Spider-Verse as the best animated films of the 2010s. I love the Lego Movie. I think it's one of my favorite animated movies of all time. It's just everything about it is just very heartfelt. It's not like trying to be a bunch of cringy tie-in like memes like today. No, it doesn't do like those cringy animated features today. No, it actually feels really heartfelt and it feels really, yeah, it kind of does the pretty good action movie cliches too. Like, and this was for a movie I thought would kind of not be good when I saw the trailers. No, this was one of those films that blew me away with how really phenomenal it surprisingly was. It blew so many people away. It blew all the most it got almost a 100% of Rotten Tomatoes, and of course, it was like a perfect story. This Lego figure, who's this construction worker named Emmett, ends up being kind of considered the special in this prophecy, and he has to basically stop what is his town's ruler from basically gluing the whole world together. It's a pretty good premise. That's actually pretty clever. Clever in kind of a way. It's kind of a good take on a lot of cliche action movies today and nowadays. So eventually, it did. But of course, like most popular films, it made over $400 million worldwide at the box office on a $60 million budget. And so Warner Bros. Was pretty much as I would have loved to see a sequel to this, Warner Bros. Of course would, regardless if fans wanted it or not, Warner Bros. Like, hey, look, hey, you go it? Good, we got the money. We're going to make more of these fuckers. So, instead of getting the sequel straight away, we got Lego Batman movie first. Very good, also very good spin-off. Lego Ninjago movie I never saw, but... And then we all got the big disappointments. That was the Lego Movie 2, the second part. Like, this movie took way too long to make. Releasing this 5 years after the first one is a big no-no. Replacing Phil Lord and Chris Miller is also a big no-no, but I think they probably knew how disappointing this movie would be, and they pretty much kind of quickly bailed, so I guess they were kind of smart to do that, but just replace Lord and Miller with the directors of films, like Deuce Bigalow, Shrek Forever After, Alvin and the Chipmunks Chipwrecked, and Trolls. There you go. What a great way to continue on from the first one. Very good idea. Get a director who's not known for a lot of memorable stuff. But anyway, yeah, it's like even this movie just threw so many plot points. They even recognize, you know what? Okay, I guess we already told the story of Emmett, so I guess we can tell the story of some of all the other comic relief characters from the first one, like Wildstyle instead. But no. Yeah, but in the end, this movie failed and it got sold to Universal. Hopefully Universal makes another Lego movie eventually to redeem the second part, but in the end, yeah, I really wish just the Lego movie, the first one in general, despite one good spin-off with Lego Batman, Lego movie should have just stayed by itself. Alright, so, we are now at number 9, and number 9 is going to be for a sequel, ironically, and a fourth installment of a franchise. However, this was a fourth installment that was not really needed either, but was actually good, and actually still felt like, despite not being needed, also felt like a pretty decent close to its franchise too. And that would have to be for none other than 2007's Live Free or Die Hard. Now, let's summarize the whole Die Hard franchise. The first one is a phenomenal action movie masterpiece, one of the best action movies of all time. And then you got Die Hard 2, Die Harder, not as great really, but okay for what it is, I guess. And then you've got Die Hard with a Vengeance, the second greatest film in the series, probably this film in the whole series, and probably one of the few good third installments out there. Out there in general, some good chemistry with John McClane and Zeus, aka Bruce Willis and Samuel Jackson, and a good villain in Simon Gruber, especially with the performance from Jeremy Irons. And then, of course, around 12 years after Die Hard with Vengeance, we then went and we got Live Free or Die Hard. Yeah. And this time, revolving around a 4th of July fest, and was actually took place within a few days instead of just one day. Now, this was not some fans can debate they don't like this or they do love this, but personally, I love this movie. I like the unrated version of this movie. I do not like the PG-13 version of this movie a lot, very much, but this should have been the end to the Die Hard series. Because what we got in 2013 was a shitfest fifth film. This fifth movie just basically goes, okay, take John McClane, put him in Russia, rush the movie 97 minutes long, put Jai Courtney as his son, and just have John McClane be some asshole who just punches Russians, runs them over with his cars, have Jacques claim be his son, be this really annoying brat you basically don't give a shit about. They don't even have good chemistry together. They just look like they really hate one another. The minute you see them on screen, you just want as soon as this movie starts, you're already just wishing for this damn movie to be over, and it doesn't even know what villain it's just trying to be. Like, apparently even Bruce Willis really did not like this movie, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this is definitely why we hopefully after this movie, we don't get another Die Hard sequel, and hopefully we just never. This is a clear sign that Die Hard should have just stayed a 4-movie series, and that's it. Alright, now, kicking down to number 8 would have to be for a Marvel film. Surprisingly, no, there's actually going to be 2 Marvel movies on this list. One of them, and this one, is not in the MCU. This was made around during their early rising to fame days, when they were starting to rise to fame. So yeah, this was one of their first few films they made on the big screen. And this is for a sequel to the film in 1998 that kicked off their career in the film industry. And that was, of course, with 1998's Blade. No, Blade is not on this list because you'll get to why in a little bit, but Blade was the movie. When it was released, it was mixed received by critics, but it was very acclaimed, amazing reviews from Marvel fans and Blade fans themselves. And the movie made a pretty decent profit at the box office and made even more successful money on home media sales, and it launched Marvel into the spotlight, which would pretty much go on to make films like X-Men, Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi films. And of course, we all know what that meant. A sequel to Blade was coming. And this sequel was actually good, so the sequel that came after this sequel was not. So yeah, number 8 is for none other than 2002's Blade 2. Oh man, just why would you go from Blade 2 to whatever the hell came next? Just why? Like, you have Blade 2, Blade 2 continues right from where the first one left off. It's not one of those sequels that just rehashes the first film. It's not as great as Blade 1. I still like Blade 1 a little better because it's a little more serious and a little more mature, but Blade 2, I like that Blade 2 goes right from the ending of the first one. It continues right on from there. It's kind of like Blade 1 and 2 is kind of like a 2-parter film, really, but it continues from there. I like how we find out that Whistler was alive the whole time, and he's back, and now he has to help. This movie, I like that he has to actually work with the vampires to stop another bigger, badder enemy this time. I actually kind of like that. How the Nightwalker has to actually team up with some of his foes and help stop a bigger threat than them themselves. Which was a very nice sequel, but however, what really should have not been made was the third film that followed, Blade Trinity. Oh my god. This is what I call one of the most embarrassing Marvel movies in history. Like, it was not Blade at all. It did not. In fact, this third one had no reason to exist because Blade 2 did not even set up a third film. Now, granted, you guys can hate on Spider-Man 3, you guys can hate on X-Men The Last Stand, but there's a difference. At least Spider-Man 2 and X2 X-Men United set up those movies. The ending of those movies actually tells you there's going to be a third one because they end on kind of cliffhangers. Like Spider-Man 2 ends with Harry discovering his father's Green Goblin equipment, and he realizes his dad was the Green Goblin. And he pretty much is ready to continue his revenge of Spider-Man. X2 X-Men United kind of sets up Last Stand's attempt at the Dark Phoenix storyline in kind of a way. Blade 2, it's none of those. It does not set up any other sequels. There was no point. But no, instead, since it made more money than the first film, of course New Line was going to go and make a sequel that Wesley Snipes read the script and was like, yeah, no. I'm going to go sit in my trailer. Later, New Line Cinema, bye, fuckers. Yeah. This is why I like to pretend the only Blade movies we have are 1 and 2. Alright, so kicking off at number 7 is going to be for a horror film that came out into the 90s. Around 1992, it was another one, a story from Clive Barker, aka the director of Hellraiser. And this film is going to be for This number 7 is going to be for none other than 1992's Candyman. Now, just why would just had to go make sequels to frickin' this? Why? Who would damn hell thought this was a good idea to give Candyman sequels? Because Candyman was a perfect just standalone movie. It worked better on its own. And for those of you that should probably know, I love Candyman. That's probably my favorite horror movie of the 90s, tied with Scream. Just love everything about it. Candyman was no slasher icon. Like the studios that made these two sequels that came for it thought it was. They were like, Candyman was just some demonic spirit that could only be summoned if you say his name 5 times, not some weird slasher icon that studios thought was perfect to be like Freddy or Jason or Michael Myers or Chucky or Pinhead. Because with Jason, Freddy, you could tell more stories with those guys. Those guys can never be killed. You could at least tell more stories with them. Even Chucky, you could give some more stories. Because Chucky's kind of an already dead dude. Candyman, on the other hand, is just some demonic spirit. He's not some slasher killer. Yeah, plus, not to mention, the 2 sequels it got had literally no connection to the first one whatsoever. When it comes to the new Candyman sequel, aka Candyman 2021, I actually did like that movie, but even that movie doesn't come anywhere close to the first one. Like Rotten Tomatoes thinks it does. I'm sorry, but that 84% Candyman 2021 has is kind of a really overrated score, but I did like that. That's pretty much the only sequel to Candyman I liked, but honestly, I also did wish that with the movie we just should have got to begin with. Not like crap like Farewell to the Flesh or Day of the Dead. Because yeah, in the end, Candyman should have just stayed a 1-movie series, and it just worked better as just the one. Alright, so now kicking off at number 6 is going to be for a film released in 1984, and it's actually a horror comedy movie, and it's just probably an iconic film to my childhood. Yeah, like, just this is one of the most iconic movies in general, and it's actually going to be getting another movie coming out in 2 weeks. And that is going to be for none other than 1984's Ghostbusters. Now, see my same comments with Candyman. See my comments with some of the other movies on my previous list, like The Hangover and Speed and Independence Day, or etc. You have this concept of these college guys, professors, who become exterminators, except not exterminating pests like bugs or rats or mice. This time they're exterminating paranormal stuff like ghosts, thus forming the team of Ghostbusters. It's which is what I call a perfect grade 1 movie concept. And just an iconic plot for a film. Definitely don't try to follow that shit up twice. And definitely don't try to repeat that shit decades later with an all-star woman cast, because Ghostbusters 2 and Ghostbusters Answer the Call are dog shit follow-ups. Basically what 1981's Ghostbusters 2 does is basically, after the ending of the first one where the Ghostbusters were praised for their actions, this time 1989's Ghostbusters 2 begins with apparently they were shut down instead because we didn't like that you damaged property and stuff. And apparently Venkman and Dana were never together, but somehow she gave birth to a baby while single. No, I'm not buying that. No fan of the first one's buying that. No, thanks for just ruining every great thing that happened in the first one. Good way to already ruin your sequel. So yeah, this was just a retreat of the first one, and Answer the Call from 2016 we do not speak of on this channel. It's better just not being spoken of, and Ghostbusters Afterlife, people are hyped for that. This movie looks exciting, I can't wait to see this. This could probably save the franchise. I have no hope for this movie, guys. I can tell this just looks like another nostalgic fan service I mean, yeah, I like it's being directed by Ivan Reitman's son this time, but the movie, I need to see the movie first, but I don't have hope for this movie being good either. So yeah, in the end, in the end with Ghostbusters, I like to live in a world where there's just the one. All right, so kicking off at number five is going to be none other than than another Jim Carrey movie. Yes, because one other Jim Carrey movie made it to my previous list, and this was another Jim Carrey movie that also got an unneeded sequel years later. Except, however, it's a sequel that does not star Jim Carrey. So, let me refill this. Basically, around this prime years, Jim Carrey was known to not like doing sequels. He did Ace Ventura: Pet Detective 2, When Nature Calls, and he did not like filming it at all. So he was like, nope, I'm not doing any more sequels to my movies. My movies are only going to stay one movies, and because like many of us on this list, some movies, because even he has a good point, some movies are just better left alone the way they are. Specifically, his live action comedy movies from those times. But however, there was one film he did in 1994 that was not just Dumb and Dumber, but also another film that's pretty much an iconic film of his career. And that was for 1994's The Mask. Now, I love The Mask. That's probably my second favorite Jim Carrey movie of all time, and it's just it's funny, it's dark, it's pretty bizarre too, and it was like perfect, like same things I had with like films like Ghostbusters, just many other films on my other list. The Mask only worked as just a one movie series, and that was it. It didn't need like a follow up, because it has no wonder. Yeah, that ending of The Mask pretty much showed why Jim Carrey didn't want to make follow-ups to his movies. But eventually, that didn't stop New Line Cinema from getting greedy. The sequel they tried to do went into development hell for so long, until 2005 when they decided to finally release it, entitled it Son of the Mask, and be one of the most critically despised sequels in history. Definitely one of the most cringiest I've ever had to sit through in history. And and get this, even though Jim Carrey would go on to make Dumb and Dumber 2, 20 years later, New Line Cinema tried getting Jim Carrey to star in this, and even he was like, yeah, no, I'm out of here. Good luck, New Line Cinema. You're on over for this one. So yeah, Son of the Mask instead got Jamie Kennedy for the new female lead. No, not female, male lead to find the mask. And yeah, this is somehow a sequel to The Mask, even though this doesn't even have a single connection to the first one. It's just, they even try to advertise this movie as a children's movie, even though this film feels so damn horrific to even be considered for kids. But yeah, and even if one day they do try to make another Mask movie and make it a proper follow-up to the first one, yeah, no. I think it's safe to say the damage is already just done. Alright, so now we've covered 5 movies, there's only 4 more to go on this list. So, number 4 is going to be for a baseball movie that was also from the 90s. And, this is not for like a actual baseball team movie, it's a baseball film about a bunch of kids who get together, who love baseball, and basically play baseball together all summer, have these few misadventures. And that film is going to be for none other than 1993's The Sandlot. Why in damn hell did you stupid assholes at Fox ever touch this? And especially you waited 10 years later to actually do this stuff. So, yeah. As you probably know, I love The Sandlot. That's probably my number 1 favorite baseball movie of all time. Even though it's not about an actual baseball team, it's still a baseball movie. But yeah, it's always number 1 on this list. I always enjoy watching The Sandlot. It's easily one of the funniest movies I've ever seen in my life. What followed 10 years later were 2 directed DVD abominations that just don't work. And they waited 10 years later, see my comments with The Mask. Just see my comments with The Mask. The Sandlot also just worked better as just a one movie concept, and what's worse is with the first direct-to-video sequel, The Sandlot 2, is probably the most abysmal of the two. Basically, The Sandlot 2 just took beat for beat the first one, made it in probably the shittiest, laziest way that they possibly could. And what's worse is you even have the director from the first one making this movie. And then if those who've seen The Sandlot, remember James Earl Jones's character in the first one at the end of the movie? He even comes back in this shitty sequel, and not even he could save the sequel. Like, I don't know how they got the poor dude to star in the sequel, but probably just for money reasons. But the fact that you actually had the nerve, I forget the director's name, the first one's name, but the fact you actually had the nerve to go ruin your masterpiece with a sequel 10 years later, direct to DVD, a bunch of new kids that just aren't enjoyable to watch, repeat some of the same stuff from the first one, and just make it boring this time. And the fact that Fox would later have the nerve to follow this up with a third one, yeah, that's definitely a really big sign you should definitely not be doing this. Alright, now we have made it to the big bad three. The top 3 movies on this list. And these top 3 are the films the most that should have never gotten a single damn follow-up in their lives. And number 3 is actually going to be for a sequel itself. This franchise actually only worked with one good sequel, and that was it. Yes, number 3 is for 1992's Home Alone 2 Lost in New York. Wow. Talk about garbage made for TV bullshit. Man, like, because now with the first Home Alone movie, that didn't really need a sequel either, but because that film was just an iconic Christmas film, it kind of did also work kind of on its own, but Home Alone 2 is also a pretty good sequel, albeit not as much as Home Alone 1, but at least with this movie, it may rehash the plot of the first film or concept of the first film, but this time around, it does a few different things, unlike most other rehash sequels like The Hangover 2. It's not 100% a rehash, it still does some different stuff. Like this time, Kevin is alone again, but he's alone in a city this time instead of a house. The Wet Bandits are back and they're still funny, at least they still have their funny charm. And this time, instead of robbing a bunch of houses, this time they get much more sinister, they're much more evil in this movie. They actually want to rob a whole entire children's charity this time. So the stakes, I actually really still like Home Alone 2 because the stakes are even higher this time. Like the whole situation is more tense this time around because this time Kevin has to basically save these sick children from getting their charity money robbed. Because this Toy Story Visits actually donates these money to these sick children in the hospital every Christmas. So I really like what they did with Home Alone 2 Lost in New York. And I like how they give it a bit of a more longer runtime too. Because that was kind of my only criticism with the first one, is that it fell a little short. But, however, only one sequel to Home Alone worked because Home Alone 3, Home Alone Taking Back the House, and Home Alone The Holiday Heist are just a bunch of stupid fan fiction movies that just do not work. Because once again, see my comments with Blade 2. Yeah. You have one sequel that works in this franchise, and you just make more because Fox saw how much money 1 and 2 were making, and they decided, hey, let's go make more of these damn movies. Let's just replace, however, Macaulay Culkin didn't want to, because kind of retiring from Hollywood around that time, and we all know where his path went to, but so they got Home Alone 3, which was not Home Alone, and he was not even home at the house by himself. It was a different kid. One that doesn't even have any of the charm Kevin McAllister does, and this time somehow there's 4 robbers trying to get into the house. No, that does not work. Only 2 robbers. You should have just only kept it with 2 robbers. That's it, but there's no connection to the first one, but it's tolerable compared to what comes next. What came next was just TV bullshit, like Taking Back the House, you bring back the McAllisters, just cast different actors whose careers are nowhere, who could not, like even the actor from Marv and his new companion could not act their ways out of a paper box. And he got The Holiday Heist, which is also not even connected. It's not Home Alone, but so in the end, Home Alone franchise is just one, and Lost in New York and we prefer to keep it that way. Alright, so number 2 is going to be for an action movie based off a Hasbro toy line that was released in 2007. And it's also based off an iconic 80s franchise about a bunch of robots that can morph into various things. Yes, number 2 on this list is going to be for none other than Michael Bay's 2007 film, The First Transformers. This is definitely a major example I've used when certain films should have never, ever gotten a sequel, and this is always one of them. Because this franchise only had one good installment, and that was the first film. This version, anyways. But, I mean, like, Bumblebee was also very good. In fact, I kind of think Bumblebee's even better than this movie, personally. Because at least with Bumblebee was actually the proper Transformers we grew up with in the 80s. Us 80s or 90s kids grew up with. It's what Transformers should be. With this movie, however, it's not really Transformers, but it was still a pretty good movie nonetheless, because at least it still kind of focused on the Transformers more than the humans. This is the only film in the Michael Bay series that actually exists, focuses on the Transformers, actually gives the Transformers screen time like Optimus Prime, and plus, speaking of Optimus Prime, you have Peter Cullen coming back to voice him. And his voice, I like how they still kept his voice actor for this film, because I don't think anyone else could voice Optimus Prime better than Peter Cullen does. And you even have, like, with the human characters, Sam, aka Shia LaBeouf's character, only works fine with this movie, and he at least still had that funny Anthony Anderson character. Anthony Anderson was still a pretty funny comic relief. However, there was a downside. This movie was also, unfortunately, very profitable at the box office, and we should have known what was going to be coming because of that. It meant Michael Bay was going to be making more and more of these damn things. Which, honestly, he should not have been, and he should not have been the one to direct these sequels. It just proves, because he may have worked fine with the first film, he sure shit didn't work well with the sequels. Because Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, Dark of the Moon, Age of Extinction, and The Last Knight are probably some of the worst sequels to ever be made in existence. And I have not seen The Last Knight, guys, and I plan to keep it that way. But I have seen Revenge, Dark, and Age of Extinction, and I hate all three of those sequels. I don't know why I kept giving this franchise a chance. I should have just stayed the hell away when I should have, but Revenge of the Fallen I did used to like as a kid at the time, but I have gone on to despise that damn sequel. Dark of the Moon is okay, I guess. It's fine. It's tolerable, but not a good sequel either. Also still a pretty bad sequel nonetheless. Still not needed. Like Revenge of the Fallen was not needed. And then Age of Extinction was pretty much the film where it was like, nope, that's it. I'm done with this franchise. This franchise has pretty much just buried itself in a hole. It cannot get out of that. And I skipped seeing Last Night because of how bad Age of Extinction was. I almost came close to skipping Bumblebee too, because I was just done with Transformers after too many terrible Michael Bay movies, but I'm glad I gave Bumblebee a chance and I liked it. But however, these are sequels I will never watch again, because, and this pretty much shows that Michael Bay's Transformers should have stayed a one movie series, not just because the sequels I got were terrible, but it just didn't work with any other films. Like, people can argue, but the first one's end credit scene was kind of a cliffhanger that kind of needs to be followed up on. Yeah, fine, but I picture that as Starscream retreating in banishment, not going to go alert more Decepticons of Autobots' rival on Earth. I picture that as Starscream being banished to space for good. And I pretend the story just ends there, and it's just a beautiful way to just end the whole storyline of the Michael Bay films there. Alright, we are down to the number 1 pick. And this number 1 pick is going to be for a film that's not really getting sequels per se, but more like other films that are set after this movie, or TV shows even. And these really should not be happening, and they haven't even finished doing these yet. I think there's going to be doing like 20 more years of these, but either way, these should not be happening to begin with. And that's going to be for 2019's Avengers Endgame. Now, they're not getting like sequels per se, but there are going to be like a number of follow-ups. They're going to keep Disney, like the greedy people they are, like how they continued Star Wars, they're going to keep continuing the MCU, and they're just going to make this whole movie pointless, like with Eternals is pretty much showing, which I'm going to be having to review this week. Ugh. But of course, some of these characters, these new characters that don't really need to have continuations, are getting continuations themselves with Disney Plus shows like Falcon and Winter Soldier, WandaVision, and they're all undoing those characters' happy endings. Because Falcon and Winter Soldier, I tried watching the first episode, and as soon as Falcon gives up that shield, I was just done with the series. I did not want to go watch the series after that. Because that is not how you do. This is basically just stabbing the ending of Endgame in the back. And then, of course, Eternals. The plot of the Eternals just basically makes Bruce bringing back everybody and burning off his own army and just completely pointless now. And of course, what else can I think of? Oh yeah. And this whole Phase 4 or 5 stuff is going to make it look like Tony Stark sacrificed himself for nothing. Great. Yeah. So these are pretty much, I could go on, but these are pretty much the exact reasons why Avengers Endgame is the #1 movie on this list of the second half of this list of films that should never have ever had a follow-up or sequel of any kind. Pretty much, yeah. So in the end, same comments I have with Return of the Jedi. There's a certain time when where the ending of a certain movie should signal just the end of a franchise. But until then, so yeah, that's pretty much my list of the second list of the top 11 of the other top 11 movies that did not need a sequel. And until then, that will be it for this video. Thank you all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, then don't forget to like, subscribe to Movie Lover 120.